Could we soon see video of the moments leading up to convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein's death in his jail cell? It seems to be the promise from the FBI, and at the same time that the administration is trying to release any information about Epstein that's still hidden, the government is now facing a scathing lawsuit from one of the first known reported victims. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, as we know, infamous sex offender and millionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019 at the Metropolitan Correction Center in New York City, right? Prison guards found him dead in his cell after he reportedly fashioned a noose out of a bed sheet, was found kneeling with a makeshift rope around his neck. But we also know that Epstein had been arrested for allegedly trafficking minor girls for sex and apparently been getting away with it for decades. That's what the allegations were. And that is where a new lawsuit against the U.S. government comes in. This is what you might not be familiar with. Maria Farmer, now in her 50s, claims that she was sexually assaulted by Epstein and his so-called madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, in the 90s. And Farmer claims when she contacted the FBI about the assault and all of these other sex crimes that she believed Epstein was collecting, they hung up on her. Now, this is a major lawsuit, major allegations. I want to bring on right now John Clune, civil sex abuse attorney and former prosecutor. John, thanks so much for taking the time. We will get into the specifics of the suit. Generally speaking, is it unusual to go after the government for what is essentially failure to do their jobs? We told you about this crime. We told you this was going on, and you did nothing about it, or you ignored our claims. Have you seen something like this before?
We've seen it, but it is also what I would say unusual. I mean, historically, those cases have not been very successful, but we may have had a little bit of a turning point with the Larry Nassar case. You know, the former doctor with the U.S. Olympic gymnastics team. That was a successful lawsuit using the same claims that are being used here. So it may be something that we're going to see more and more of.
Got to talk about these recent comments by the FBI leadership that they want to release video from inside the MCC showing essentially the moments before Epstein's death. So the death has been, as you know, fodder for conspiracy theories for years, and honestly, for good reason. The details surrounding it have always been a little bit squirrely. According to the BOP, Bureau of Prisons, Epstein tried to harm himself in July of 2019, was found semi-conscious in his cell with injuries to his neck. He was put on suicide watch. He was held in an observation cell, but after 6 days was given the all clear by a doctor to go back to a special housing unit where he was supposed to have a roommate. But in August of 2019, Epstein's cellmate was transferred. No new cellmate was apparently put in his room. Guards were supposed to check on him every 30 minutes throughout the night, but the two guards assigned to watch him on August 10th apparently fell asleep. An investigation found that the two later falsified prison records, okay? So you can see how there's some questions here. There was also a lack of cameras. 2 cameras in front of Epstein's cell malfunctioned, according to the BOP, and a third had footage that was reportedly unusable. Guards found him dead in his cell when they distributed breakfast. His body was removed from the scene against BOP policy, and photos of his body as it was found were never taken. So that led to widespread theories over the years that Epstein didn't take his own life, but was instead murdered to keep him from revealing the secrets of powerful people as he went to trial. That was the main claim, the main allegation that has circulated for years. The Trump administration has promised to release any further files associated with Jeffrey Epstein and his alleged sex trafficking ring. But thus far, most of what's been released was already out in the public domain, like the phone contact book, flight logs for Epstein's private plane. But just a few weeks ago, FBI Director Kash Patel told a congressional committee that it was confirmed that Epstein died by suicide. And then you had FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, who reiterated this on an episode of Fox and Friends with co-host Lawrence Jones when he questioned him about whether a video exists showing Epstein's death. And Bongino replied, no, not the actual act, but the entire MCC bay. It was only one camera. There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release, that's what's taken a while on this. We're working on cleaning it up to make sure you have it enhanced, and we're going to give the original so you don't think there were any shenanigans. You're going to see there's no one there but him. John, what's your reaction to all this?
Well, I think, like you said, Jesse, there's unlimited reason to be suspicious of exactly what went down that night, and I think there's also a reason to be suspicious of what information we're actually going to get. You know, the actual video itself, what it depicts, it's obviously not going to depict the actual act of suicide or homicide, whatever you believe the case to be about what went down. But it sounds like it's going to be of some limited value. I'm not sure it's going to really answer our questions.
I don't know. It might. I mean, if people see the video, Maybe it'll quash some theories. I'm sure there will be other people who might say, yeah, but I don't really know. Was he pressured to do it? Did someone force him to do it? Was like Godfather Part 2? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see. By the way, no indication from Dan Bongino or the FBI on whether that video will actually be released, and if so, when it will be released. But maybe we'll even dedicate a sidebar to it when it happens. By the way, totally off topic. I'm just a warning here. Totally off topic, but very, very serious issue. Can we talk for a second about debt? Yeah, debt doesn't just show up one day. It builds little by little. There's credit cards, car loans, medical bills. Suddenly, you are juggling all of these payments. You're feeling stuck, but here's the good news. We got American Financing as our sponsor, and they help homeowners like you every day. They use your home's equity and roll that high-interest debt into one simple, affordable payment. They are saving homeowners an average of $800 a month. There's no judgment. There's no pressure, just real solutions that put you back in control. It starts with one call. Only takes 10 minutes to get started, and there are no upfront fees, so it costs you nothing to find out how much you can save. And if you start today, you may be able to delay your next 2 mortgage payments. American Financing salary-based consultants, they are ready to listen. They are ready to help. Take back your peace of mind with American Financing. Call American Financing today at 866-891-2821. That's 866-891-2821, or head over to americanfinancing.net/sidebar. But anyway, talking about this new lawsuit. This is why we wanted to have you on, John. So this new lawsuit from Maria Farmer, who says that she was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, which she filed in Washington, D.C.'s federal district court on May 29th. She's bringing 2 causes of action against the United States of America: negligence and negligent infliction of emotional distress. And the scathing opening paragraph gives you an idea of what exactly Farmer accuses the government of. Quote, for nearly a quarter of a century, Jeffrey Epstein, the infamous sex trafficker and abuser of minors and young women, along with his co-conspirators, was able to engage in a wide-ranging sex trafficking venture because the Federal Bureau of Investigation, United States Department of Justice, and United States Attorney's offices failed to listen to or protect his sex-trafficked, sexually abused, and sexually exploited victims. And the lawsuit goes on to explain that she reported Epstein and Maxwell to the FBI in 1996, saying that the two had not only assaulted her, but also had committed crimes against her younger siblings. So you might be asking, by the way, who is Maria Farmer? Well, I'm going to jump ahead in the suit to where Maria talks about her interactions with the millionaire and his madam. The complaint reads, in the mid-1990s, Maria, then in her mid-20s, was a burgeoning artist, having recently graduated from the New York Academy of Art and a Master of Fine Art degree. With the encouragement and insistence of Peggy Guggenheim, then head of the New York Academy of Art, Maria met Epstein and sold him one of her paintings for half the amount she had already been offered for the price. And this is allegedly the piece purchased by Epstein. It's a depiction of a woman in a dress lying on a couch with a man in white shorts standing in the doorway looking at her. Maria told the outlet ArtNet News in 2019 that she'd already sold the painting to a buyer in Germany for $12,000, but she said Guggenheim insisted she sell it to Epstein at a discount because he was, quote, such a great benefactor. Now, Guggenheim later told ArtNet that she didn't remember that happening. But going back to the complaint, quote, Epstein and Maxwell bragged to Maria that they were connected to important, wealthy, influential people who assisted, supported, and protected them in their endeavors. Epstein hired Maria initially as an art scout for his collection. The position expanded to receptionist, clerk, and other duties in Epstein's New York City mansion, an apartment building on East 66th Street where Epstein housed many young girls along with his office. The complaint talks about the different things in the house that pointed to allegedly nefarious activities, some of them secret, some of them out in the open. Quote, Epstein informed Maria about the video cameras recording activities at the New York City mansion. He showed her a media room filled with such recording devices and monitoring systems. Epstein noted his sophisticated computer equipment, which was in continuous use. Epstein and Maxwell also bragged about a modeling book that was so valuable, important, and private that they kept it locked in Epstein's safe. This modeling book, which they shared with others occasionally, contained images of what appeared to be children explicitly posed in various stages of undress. Maria also saw binders with images of nude teens and young women at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. In the summer of 1996, Epstein encouraged Maria to leave New York City, where she lived, and become a summer artist in residence at his home in New Albany, Ohio. that residence was part of or adjacent to Les Wexner's estate. Les Wexner is the owner of several major retail companies, including Victoria's Secret. He was close friends with Epstein for years, employed him as his financial advisor. In recent years, he said he had no idea about Epstein's alleged illicit activities, claimed that Epstein had scammed him out of money. Go back to the complaint, quote, in or about late July or early August 1996, during a visit to the Ohio property, Epstein and Maxwell sexually assaulted Maria. Maria was stunned and devastated. Maria also discovered that during their visit, Epstein and Maxwell had stolen images that Maria maintained and cataloged by number in her personal private collection for her personal use in her artwork, including nude images of two minor siblings. By the way, one of those siblings, Annie Farmer, has spoken publicly in the past about what she says Epstein did to her and testified during Ghislaine Maxwell's federal trial. Maxwell was convicted of sex trafficking, currently serving a 20-year prison sentence. Epstein and Maxwell reminded Maria that they were connected to important and influential people. They warned her that bad things would happen to her if she did or said anything. Maxwell directed Maria to keep quiet and threatened to torture artwork, the building where she was living, and all the people in it. Maxwell told Maria that she and Epstein could and would destroy her career. Maria believed that they had the power to do so and much more. John, talk to me about this. Talk to me about these recordings, this apparent modeling book. You know, the FBI searched the mansion in New York after Epstein's arrest. Obviously, none of that evidence has been released to the public, although Attorney General Pam Bondi did say recently that the FBI is making its way through thousands of alleged child sexual abuse videos found in Epstein's possession. What are you taking away from this?
Yeah, I mean, from what the complaint says, there's a tremendous amount of what should be evidence of the sexual abuse of the plaintiff in this case. And so for the actual lawsuit itself, it's going to depend on what did the FBI do and what do they not do with this information to determine whether or not they're going to have liability. But at least from what we read in the complaint, there should be a substantial amount of evidence. And what the FBI did with that is going to be the core of the case.
But the first part of a trial would have to be that she was sexually assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein and was facilitated by Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Like that, if this goes to trial, that's got to be the first half of this case, right?
That's right. And, in these types of cases where you have like potential institutional liability, like against the FBI, it is kind of a hard defense for the FBI to mount to suggest that Maria was not a victim of sexual assault. So although it is required that they show that she was a victim of this kind of abuse, I don't know that that's where the FBI is going to play their cards.
Do they stipulate? Do they stipulate and say, listen, we are stipulating she was sexually abused, and then you move on to the second part of the trial, and in openings at a trial, both sides say yes, she was sexually abused by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, even though there wasn't a trial with respect to that specific incident regarding Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I guess they could do that. They could stipulate.
They could do that, and one of the benefits to doing that is you cut off at least some of the really sympathetic evidence that might otherwise be presented to a jury. So unless they had a particularly good defense on that point, or they wanted to at least, cast some shade, which you'd hope the FBI and Department of Justice wouldn't do, but, some shade on the plaintiff, it might make some sense to at least consider stipulating, and then there'd be less of a focus on the horrific abuse.
So let's talk about the FBI for a second. So Maria claims that she tried to report her assault to the FBI in 1996. And according to the lawsuit, she told them what had happened to her, as well as what she knew about his alleged sexual abuse and trafficking of young girls. She claims she told them about his possession, production, distribution of child sexual abuse material, including nude photos of her two siblings. The lawsuit states the FBI, in violation of its mandatory obligations under regulations and DOJ policies, chose to do absolutely nothing. In fact, an FBI agent taking Maria's call hung up on her, and no one at the FBI attempted to follow up with her or pursue her valid and serious allegations, most of which continued for many years, if not decades, with wide-ranging tragic consequences. As a result, Epstein and others working with him were able to threaten bodily harm to Maria and her family for decades, forcing her to relocate many times and even change her name. In the meantime, Epstein exponentially multiplied his sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking of girls and young women. To date, federal authorities have refused or ignored Maria's request to commence an investigation of these serious unresolved allegations. They have also flatly denied Maria's efforts to address the issues outside of litigation. In so doing, defendant left Maria with no choice but to commence this lawsuit. Had the United States paid attention to Maria in 1996 and 2006 and to innumerable other victims over the years and complied with their mandatory duties rather than succumb to the dictates of a well-connected billionaire sex trafficker and his high-powered legal team, Epstein's sex trafficking, sexual abuse, and child pornography crimes could have been stopped soon after they began, and countless young women and girls would have been spared more than a quarter of a century of unchecked sexual abuse and exploitation. So, John, a lot of questions I have here. What could be a defense from the government here? What could they say? Either this didn't happen, this is totally not true, or there's a reason for why we didn't follow up.
There's a couple of things that they'll probably want to focus on. One of them is, you see in the complaint these constant references to a non-discretionary duty. Generally speaking, the law enforcement is not liable just because they did a bad job. And when it comes to the Federal Tort Claims Act, it has to be some sort of duty that they violated that they were required to do. If they just didn't do their job well enough, that's not going to be a basis for liability. So that's one thing that they can say is, look, maybe we didn't do everything we could have, but this was not a mandatory duty that we had. This was just discretionary, and you can disagree with us or agree with us, but that makes us not liable. So that's one of the key things that they'll initially focus on. And then the other thing they'll do is they will have a laundry list of things that they did in fact do, and come up with reasons why their investigation stalled out. Maybe they'll be legitimate, maybe they won't be legitimate, but I would fully expect them to have a long list of the history of the investigation to try to show that they did do the things that they were required to do, but the investigation was just frustrated for one reason or another.
They can't settle this, right? If they settle this, does that look like acknowledgement of the validity of her claims?
It does look like that, but they absolutely can settle it. I mean, they settled the Larry Nassar case for $139 million. It's unclear what happened to the previous lawsuit against them that was dismissed. Was it last year, involving the Epstein other victims? They certainly can settle it, but it does have that implication that they were responsible.
Well, I'll tell you this lawsuit lays out the various laws that Maria claims the FBI broke by not taking her seriously, including its own rules from the Manual for Investigative Operations and Guidelines. So the suit points out that the FBI had put particular emphasis on catching child predators and saving children, especially when there are allegations of a trafficking ring. But Maria says the FBI completely dropped the ball when it came to Epstein. The lawsuit actually provides kind of relevant information connected to the FBI's mission to investigate crimes and protect victims of violent crimes, the FBI's requirement to investigate obscene matter cases and recognition that such cases often involve child sexual abuse, the United States prioritization of reporting, investigation, and prosecution of sex crimes against children, the FBI's mandatory reporting obligation to report child sex abuse and exploitation to law enforcement as per statute and guidelines, and the FBI requirements to notify victims regarding criminal investigations and the availability of victim services, including protection from intimidation and harassment. So, John, you also wonder, is it a no-brainer that if someone called saying not only did they have inside information about a trafficking scheme, but they themselves had been a victim of sexual assault by the ringleader, you have to investigate? I mean, citing these different positions, they're getting very, very specific and very granular about what the FBI allegedly failed to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's such a strongly worded complaint in regards to the non-discretionary factor that it almost borders between negligence and conspiracy at times when you read some of the language in the complaint. But all of that language goes back to this same issue, is that they need to be able to establish that the agency, the FBI, was required by law or by their policy to do this investigation, not just that they did a bad job.
Lawsuit even provides a snippet of this old journal entry, allegedly written by Maria, and it appears to back up her claims. It reads, quote, "The evil J. Epstein and Maxwell tried to ruin my life, Annie's life, and redacted. They molested all of us in various ways and made us all feel defiled. Redacted. I had to turn them in to the FBI." Now, according to Maria, she first contacted the New York City Police Department to lay out her allegations, including that Epstein had allegedly terrorized her, threatened to burn down her apartment building. And she claims the NYPD told her they could only help with the potential arson aspects of the case and told her to contact the FBI. So she says she tried to explain this to the FBI, but they hung up on her. John, does this all make sense to you about what would have happened? I mean, the NYPD saying you got to go to the FBI and FBI not taking her allegations seriously? I mean, would a call like this have been taken more seriously in 2025 if true?
I'll tell you what's odd about that is it is unusual that you call a law enforcement agency and they're gonna take some piece of the investigation and then say, well, if you want the rest of this investigated, you got to call somebody else. Law enforcement works together. The NYPD works with the FBI all day long, every day. So that part is a little unusual to me, that they would just refer her to the FBI instead of actually making the contact and have some sort of joint investigation into the situation. So that part I think is unusual. But other than that, I'd say, the way this is laid out in the complaint, that journal entry that you mentioned, it's a very well laid out complaint and does not look good for the FBI.
It's interesting, nearly a decade after Maria says she reported Epstein to Maxwell, this woman calls the Palm Beach Police Department to report that her 14-year-old stepdaughter had been taken to Epstein's mansion by an older girl, and the woman claims that this teen was told to strip, give Epstein a massage, and at the end of the encounter, she was given $300. The police started an investigation, and despite uncovering details about Epstein's alleged crimes from multiple victims, only 2 testified before a grand jury, and Epstein was indicted for solicitation of a prostitute and procuring a minor for prostitution. He ended up pleading guilty in what's been called this sweetheart deal, where he spent some time in prison but was given daily work release. In exchange, he wasn't charged at a federal level. The Palm Beach police, unhappy with the prosecution's handling of the case, they contacted the FBI. The agency started an investigation. Epstein was federally indicted in 2007. Again, an even sweeter deal. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida agreed to a secret non-prosecution agreement, also called an NPA, and it granted Epstein, potentially co-conspirators, immunity from prosecution in Florida. And that puts the brakes on the FBI investigation. But Maria says when the investigation was still ongoing, FBI agents showed up unannounced to her home to follow up on her initial report. And she says that confirms that there was some kind of report on the books that identified her as a prior complainant. So why were they just now looking into it 10 years later? If that timeline's accurate, that helps her claims, right, John?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And the complaint does a good job laying that out. I think that, with what we know now, with the benefit of hindsight, we can look back at the non-prosecution agreement and the way that whole initial criminal case was handled. It seems pretty outrageous. It would be good to know exactly what U.S. Attorney's Office had at that time, but it certainly, if you read the complaint and go by what's in the complaint, it looks pretty bad.
Yeah, and the lawsuit says Maria reached out again to the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Inspector General, asking for an investigation into all of these apparent failures. It reads, quote, in a letter dated May 11, 2023, the Office of the Inspector General advised Maria that while the allegations raised were concerning, they had other priorities right now, so could not further assess Maria's allegations until later, on December 2nd, 2024, some 18 months after Maria's May 2nd, 2023 letter raising her concerns and asking for an investigation. DOJ explained in a letter that the FBI's Internal Affairs Section Initial Processing Unit had carefully reviewed Maria's allegations, did not initiate investigation, and could not reveal specifics, but IAS mandated action be taken to address the concerns raised in your complaint. The FBI concluded the United States Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, IAS/IPU, considers your complaint addressed. What does that mean, John?
That's a great question. It needs more information from the FBI. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say that they have other priorities. If child sex trafficking is not high up on the list of priorities, what is on their list of priorities? Well, what they mean by saying that the complaint's been addressed is, I can only guess at it. So we have to see what they say when we get into the discovery phase of this case.
Yeah, and Maria says she's exhausted all the options to her grievances out of court. She's filed the lawsuit to get answers. And at the end of the lawsuit, it reads, Maria respectfully requests that the court enter judgment in her favor and against the United States, awarding the following to Maria: compensatory, consequential, general, and nominal damages, as well as all other available damages against the United States in an amount to be determined at trial. The costs and disbursements of the action, along with reasonable attorney's fees, costs, and expenses, pre- and post-judgment interest at the maximum legal rate, and such other and further relief as it deems just and proper. John, 2 questions for you. What exactly could she receive at a trial if she gets a favorable verdict, or maybe even a settlement, what she could be looking at? And 2, you think she's got a solid case?
So taking them in reverse order, I do think she has a solid case. If if her attorneys can prove half of what they put in the complaint, and I know these lawyers, they're good lawyers, then she's going to have a very solid case. In regards to what she could actually recover, I mean, you're looking at something that is easily in the multiple seven figures as a potential settlement claim. And if this were to get to a jury, there's really two things that we look at for damages. What is the actual impact of this to the individual, to Maria? And it's going to be a large number. But the second thing is, how outrageous is the jury going to be at the FBI based on what facts come out in discovery? And so that second part we'll have to wait and see. But if they've got the goods that they've put in the complaint, this could easily be something in a large eight-figure jury verdict.
And look, Maria Farmer, she's still making art. 2020 started working on a series of paintings and drawings called the Survivors Project, which consists of portraits of survivors of Epstein's abuse. Just a really, really sad set of allegations. We'll keep a careful eye on it, see how it develops. And again, if there's any video that releases of Epstein in the MCC, maybe we'll dedicate a sidebar to this. Maybe we'll get John Clune back to talk more about it. John Clune, thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
You bet, Jesse. Thanks.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.